What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, Drew Hoover, and today we'll be talking about Julio Jones. That's right, Julio Jones, the wide receiver for the Atlanta Falcons, who made headlines yesterday that he has made it known to the Atlanta Falcons that he wants to be traded. The news really isn't shocking, but the fact that, instead of us talking about the Atlanta Falcons trading Julio Jones out of the interest of the entire team, now Julio Jones has shared his same interest of leaving the team. So if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please go ahead and click that subscribe button. Also, if you have any graphic design needs, Anthony Garcia is your man. His link is in the description below, www.anthonygarciadesign.com. And without further ado, let's get into this segment because we're going to talk about the 5 places that I feel like he's going to end up, probably around June 1st. If you don't know, like I said, when they were talking about Julio Jones possibly being traded, they were talking about that June 1st deadline where the Atlanta Falcons could lose money prior to June 1st, but if they wait till after June 1st, they could actually save money right there. But anyway, let's get to those teams right there. And a lot of them, these teams are not just maybe about needs, they're about relationships, also about finances. That's going to be a key thing right there. When you're talking about this point in the season, there's not a lot of salary cap left when you've gone through free agency, when you've gone through the NFL draft and have signed these players. So let's get right into this then. And the first team on my list is a team that actually holds the most capital after the free agency and the NFL draft, and that is the Jacksonville Jaguars. And when you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars, you're like, why did they need a wide receiver? Yeah, they already have Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne, and you look at their wide receivers. You look at they got DJ Chark, the selection of LSU from a few years ago, and then you got the signing of Marvin Jones. And then last year they drafted Laviska Shenault Jr. out of Colorado. But when you actually break down the starters, let's focus on DJ Chark and Marvin Jones, because these are two guys that I believe have struggled with injuries, and I actually looked it up to prove that fact. In fact, there's a website called sportsinjurypredictor.com, which means not only do they track the injuries that a player has been to, but can also statistically predict the chances they are to get injured the upcoming season. It's $24 to subscribe to their website if you want to get unlimited access to them. It's a pretty interesting website. But anyway, Jacksonville, first of all, the salary cap is 39. They have just short of $39 million, so they got salary cap to spare. And then you look at DJ Chark and Marvin Jones' injuries. They've both, since 2018, have missed 10 games, and both just have a long history of missing significant time. DJ Chark is more in the spurts throughout the season. There's been a few times that Marvin Jones has missed some time, mostly towards the end of the season. He doesn't seem to finish a lot of seasons. And Sports Injury Predictor says that this season, in 2021, DJ Chark has an 82% chance of getting injured, and Marvin Jones has 88% chance of getting injured. So when you have two of your starting wide receivers that have a high chance of not playing for that season, you got to give Trevor Lawrence a wide receiver that he can depend on. And again, they're already excited that they got those 2 Clemson playmakers in the first round of the draft. But if you had Julio Jones in there in a division that always seems to sway one way or the other, I think they have a good chance now if they get Julio Jones to possibly maybe even win the AFC South. Again, it's a little far-fetched, talking about Urban Meyer's first year, but Julio Jones might make that difference. Another team to watch out for is the Indianapolis Colts. And at this point, they still have just under $23 million left in their salary cap. But to me, the biggest reason why is because who's technically their number one receiver, T.Y. Hilton. And like the receivers we talked about before, he has also missed 10 games since 2018, but it's more than that. And speaking of 2018, that was his last big year. In that year, he caught 76 passes and received for 1,270 yards and 6 TDs. But then in 2019, he caught only 45 passes for 501 yards and 5 TDs. Last year was a little bit better, but still not as high as a top wide receiver should make. 56 receptions for 762 yards and 5 touchdowns. And so to me, I feel like T.Y. Hilton has been loyal to them, but the highest touchdown total he's had has been 7 touchdowns, and he hasn't had a 7 touchdown season since 2014. So he doesn't really scream number one wide receiver. I mean, last year, they pretty much had to rely on wide receivers like Zach Pascal to pretty much make plays down the field. So to me, I feel like they need a number one wide receiver. They still have Michael Pittman. I just don't know if he's going to step into that role. So if I'm the Colts, especially now that you have Carson Wentz at quarterback, I think Julio Jones is a tempting offer right there. Again, what I mentioned about the Jacksonville Jaguars, the AFC South is, I feel like more wide open than people say. Yes, Tennessee Titans have made an act of getting to the playoffs, and the Houston Texans are pretty much garbage right now. But I still feel like there's a lot of wiggle room, to get to that crown right there. And I think Julio Jones, whether it's for the Colts or the Jaguars, like I mentioned, could end up being the difference of who wins that division. Next is the Detroit Lions, and to me, this is the most obvious pick right here, because when you look at their roster, Tyrell Williams, the wide receiver that's been with the Chargers and the Raiders last few years, really hasn't made much of a difference. And Rashad Perriman, probably one of the biggest wide receiver busts in the last few years, came out of Central Florida and then spent most of the time injured. I mean, he's a fast guy, but he doesn't have that game time speed. And even though they did draft Amon-Ra St. Brown in the 4th round, I just don't know if he's going to step it up or they'll even put him in a position to catch a lot of targets. At this point, the number one receiver in that offense is the tight end TJ Hawkinson from Iowa. So to me, I know they're going to be more of a run-based offense under offensive coordinator Anthony Lynn, but you talk about the Detroit Lions, I feel like they need to get their hands on a wide receiver, especially when you gave up Kenny Golladay, who went to the New York Giants, and like I said, Marvin Jones, who went to Jacksonville. And next is going to be the New England Patriots, and this was one of the first teams that came up when they were talking about him possibly being traded before the NFL draft. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that the New England Patriots may have also wanted Justin Fields. So there was that little trade talk right there. But obviously, like I said, what I said about the June 1st deadline, I think the Falcons are trying to avoid losing money, especially when they want to build this team for the long run. And so when I look at the New England Patriots right here, I'm actually baffled by the excitement that teams have. I mean, the defensive side, they got good defensive playmakers. But when I look at the offensive weapons that they got, first of all, let's look at the ones that they lost. They don't have Julian Edelman. They released him, and then he eventually retired. They still have N'Keal Harry, but sometime this offseason, he was part of the trade talk right there. And in the last 2 years, he's missed 11 games. So I don't know if he's a wide receiver you can really count on. And now let's get to those additions right there. Everyone brags about those tight ends, right? Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. I will give the credit to Jonnu Smith, because even in an offense under Arthur Smith in Tennessee, where the tight end is highly valued, he wasn't maximized a lot. He didn't get a lot of opportunities. So I do feel like he could get some more opportunities in New England. But as for Hunter Henry, I feel like he's been a big disappointment. I mean, again, this may be an unpopular opinion for most people that love Hunter Henry, but he's been playing for 5 years. And out of those 90 regular season games, he's played 49 games. That means he's played in 54% of the last games in the last 5 years. So I don't feel like Hunter Henry is a weapon we can really count on. And then finally, the wide receivers, Nelson Aguilar, who, again, a wide receiver disappointment that was drafted in the 1st round. The Philadelphia Eagles moved on from him. And even after last year, when statistically, technically, he had one of the best seasons he had with Derek Carr, they still tossed him off to the side. And then Kedrick born the wide receiver from the San Francisco 49ers. I honestly don't know what the hype is about those wide receivers. I don't think that the receivers that they have can help Cam Newton right there. Now, I will say that the Patriots have been more run-based, even under Tom Brady. People give a lot of credit to Tom Brady, but even despite the big years that he had, especially in 2007, they have always loved to run the ball, and especially when you got James White, Sony Michel, and Damian Harris. And then they drafted another running back out of Oklahoma, I believe it was in the 4th round. So, but I still feel like he at least needs one more solid weapon. And I think with Julio Jones and the fact that really they didn't have to trade up that much. And like I said, they didn't have to trade up in the 1st round, which would have acquired a lot of picks to get Mac Jones. So I feel like they can get Julio Jones, at least give Cam Newton one more weapon, which, by the way, I think Cam Newton and Julio Jones I think I would love that combination right there. So keep an eye out for that. And then finally, the San Francisco 49ers. And a lot of this has to do with the fact of, like I said, the head coach is Kyle Shanahan, his former offensive coordinator, for when they went to the Super Bowl to face the Patriots. And when I look at this offense right here, you may not think you need a wide receiver, but you look at the wide receivers that are Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. They mostly fit the function of, like I said, what he likes to do with motion and play action. And a lot of times they'll be used in those wide receiver reverses. But really, their top vertical threat is George Kittle, the tight end out of Iowa. So I feel like if they add Julio Jones right there, and like I said, you talk about the drafting of Trey Lance right there with his strong arm, the way he can stretch the ball vertically down the field. And, I feel like the San Francisco 49ers, if they get Julio Jones out of all these teams I mentioned, if they get Julio Jones, not only will they have a chance to win their division, I would say they would become automatic Super Bowl contenders because they'll get a lot of those defensive players back from injury last year. Like I said, they keep adding offensive weapons, through free agency and the draft. And so if they get Julio Jones, which would surprise a lot of people, San Francisco could end up having the last piece that they need to get back to the Super Bowl. And that has been Julio Jones and where he could possibly end up. And man, it's crazy, I don't want to see him leave Atlanta, but I feel like they want to move on and start a new chapter. It's funny how they're still loyal to Matt Ryan, and not to Julio Jones, but yeah, I just wish for the best for Julio Jones, and I feel like whichever team he ends up with, maybe he ends up with the Packers. I don't know. I mean, that would be awesome, right? Julio Jones and Devontae Adams right there. Give the Packers, and Aaron Rodgers a reason to be together. But, yeah, we'll see what happens, guys. So this has been Your Average Joe Sports Network. I'm your host, Drew Hoover, and have a good day, everybody.